Hello everyone, welcome to a new episode of Explore and Engage with Anam. New York City Mayor Eric Adams announced budget cuts that would reduce the number of police officers to the lowest point since the 1990s. But crime is on the rise. In New York City, crime is rising. And what happens when the size of the police force is reduced? When a crime is in progress and someone calls 911 to ask for a police officer, the response time may be impacted because of the reduction in the number of police officers. What's happening in New York City is extremely worrisome. This is not a small matter. Budget cuts adversely affecting the size of the police force. This is not a small matter. This is significant and this is very, very concerning. When there is an emergency, every minute matters. In fact, every second matters. I think we have all heard that before. During an emergency, every second matters. When the police force is reduced in size, it will likely take longer for police officers to respond to the scene of an emergency. And what that means is people will suffer. As a result of increased response time, people will suffer. This is very unfortunate. In many underdeveloped and developing countries, there are not enough, there's a lack of reliable emergency services in many underdeveloped and developing countries. But in advanced industrialized countries, citizens have access to reliable emergency services. In advanced industrialized countries, people rely on emergency services. Sadly, the situation in New York City is not a sign of progress. It's not a sign of improvement. In fact, things are getting worse in New York City. If there's a reduction in the number of police officers in New York City, then emergency response time will increase, which will lead to a greater level of uncertainty and fear. If you are a resident in New York, you have to be able to count on strong emergency response. But if New York residents now find out that because of budget cuts, the size of the police force is going to be reduced, then that creates uncertainty, that creates fear, especially at a time when crime is rising, which means if there's an emergency situation, if there's a crime in progress and somebody picks up the phone and calls 911, is there a guarantee that police will arrive within minutes, within like 3 minutes or 4 minutes? As I said earlier, that in an emergency, every second matters. And so budget cuts, when budget cuts affect the size of the police force, when budget cuts adversely affect the size of the police force, then that leads to greater fear and uncertainty in the population. And for New York City police officers, these budget cuts are very, very painful. Let me tell you, my friends, people join law enforcement because they want to serve the community. Law enforcement officers put their own lives on the line to protect and serve. being in law enforcement, it's not just a job, it's a commitment. People who serve in law enforcement have a deep sense of service. They want to keep the community safe. They want to ensure law and order. But the budget cuts that Mayor Eric Adams announced, the budget cuts will reduce the resources that law enforcement agencies need to do their work properly. And why is this happening? That's the question. Why is this happening? Well, according to Mayor Eric Adams, the migrant crisis is absorbing the city's budget. The migrant crisis is taking up more and more resources. And that's why it's leading to a crisis. It's leading to a lack of resources for other things like law enforcement. Whatever money the government has, and I've said it before, the government, whether it's local government, state government, federal government, government doesn't have its own money. Whatever money the government has, that's taxpayer money. And it's finite. It's not unlimited. And so you have a fund. The government has a fund that it creates because it's getting taxpayer dollars. And so if a bigger chunk of that fund is going towards providing housing and food and other services to the migrants, that means there's less money left over for other things like law enforcement services, sanitation, education. And so this migrant crisis is taking up lots and lots of taxpayer money, and so there's less money left for other things. And this is painful. This is a nightmare scenario. Crime is going up, and the size of the police department is being reduced. Just think about it. Let me ask you this question. How many New York City residents will seriously think about leaving the city? How many people will now think about leaving the city and going someplace else? Many people have already left New York City over the last couple of years, and more may exit the city to find better places to live. When people get tired of poor governance, many may be forced to leave the city. But it's not easy to pick up and move. It's not easy to just pack up your stuff, pack up your belongings, and move. It's not very easy. People grow roots in the community. They cannot just pick up their stuff and leave and go to some other city or some other state. It's not very easy. People do move, but once you have roots in the community, it's not easy to move. And people have friends and family and colleagues. People are part of a community that they just cannot leave behind and move. It's not easy. So what happens is that people suffer. So once again, let me say that it's time for New York City politicians to eliminate the sanctuary city status. It is time for New York City politicians to say that the city will no longer be a sanctuary city. New York City politicians should do a press conference and they should publicly declare that New York City will no longer be a sanctuary city. And as I've said before, it is time to secure the border, and it is time to stop this influx of illegal immigrants. We must secure the southern border. Thank you for listening to my podcast, my friends. If you have any thoughts, please reach out to me. Go to my website, tausifanam.net. Send me a message. Sign up for my e-newsletter. You can also connect with me on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can also send me an email at tausif@tausifanam.net. Once again, my email address is tausif@tausifanam.net. Thank you for listening to my podcast, and I hope to be back again soon with a new episode of Explore and Engage with Anam.